One of our more popular videos on the channel was a video I did on how to propagate Japanese maples. How do we graft a Japanese maple? I did that outside, the lighting was terrible, and I want to redo that video. That's what we're doing today. I've looked all over YouTube and I haven't found just a great video that breaks down from just the basics of what is a scion, what is rootstock, what is cambium layer, and then moving forward through the grafting process, and then going past the grafting process. How do you take care of a grafted tree in year 1? What do you do with it in year 2? That is the purpose of this video. We're going to start at the very beginning, some very basic stuff, and move all the way out for a year, 2 years out. What do you do with a tree after it's been grafted? Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Warren, and you're watching The Plant Doctor. Let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about are the tools that you need for the job. And so the tools are relatively simple here. If you are anything at all a gardener, you probably have a pair of hand snips. You're going to need a pair of hand snips. You're also going to need a few other things. So you'll need what we call buddy tape, B-U-D-D-Y, buddy tape. I'm going to leave a link down in the description for all of these. So if you need to pick buddy tape up or a pair of hand shears up, you can pick those up off of Amazon. Another thing you're going to need is either a pruning knife, or what I've used for the past 2 or 3 years because I found out it works just as well, a good sharp box blade. You're going to need some rubbing alcohol. You're going to need some paper towels. You're going to need a label, and you're going to need something to write on that label with. And those are the tools that you need to graft a Japanese maple. So let's start at the very beginning of the basics for the terminology you need to know for grafting a Japanese maple. Let's talk about rootstock. Rootstock is what we are going to graft onto. We want a tree that has a very vigorous root system, but maybe not so much the ornamental features that we are looking for in the leaf material. So this is just Acer palmatum. It's not a special cultivar. This is just Acer palmatum rootstock. I get these in bulk from a nursery out of Oregon. You can usually find, if you want some rootstock for Japanese maples, there's several Facebook groups. For example, the Southeastern Japanese Maple Facebook group. There's always people on there that have rootstock, and you can reach out to them if you need rootstock. But here again, this is not exclusive to Japanese maples. You can do this process with just about any tree. So you need rootstock. You need scion wood. So scion is what we want to propagate. So this came off of an Emperor 1 Japanese maple. So Emperor 1 is a red, upright Japanese maple. If you're familiar with Bloodgood Japanese maple, it looks very similar to Bloodgood. And so all we did, we picked a terminal end, and we counted back 1, 2, 3 nodes. So the nodes are where the leaves are going to come out. And then right above the 4th node, we just took our hand snips and we cut it off, okay? So that is our scion wood. There's 2 things that I need to point out to you. Before I cut the scion, I used rubbing alcohol to clean my pruning shears. Everything we do here, we need to keep it really clean. So I use rubbing alcohol. Think of this as surgery. You wouldn't go into a hospital and let them cut on you unless they had a sterile field in place, right? Kind of the same concept here. So we're going to use rubbing alcohol a lot. Also, the time of year we're doing this, I'm doing this in the month of February. So I'm in zone 8A in the United States. If you are below that zone, say you're in zone 9, you may want to start this in late January. If you're in zone 10, there's not a whole lot of Japanese maples in zone 10, but there's a few that'll make it. You may even want to do this in early January. If you're further north than me, you may want to wait a little bit later. So like if you're in, say, Nashville, Tennessee, Columbus, Ohio, you could probably get into the first part of March to do this. But the whole gist of collecting a scion this time of year, you want to collect it about 6 weeks before it's going to leaf out. This is when we're doing this. So these will begin to leaf out for me in like mid-March to into April time frame. So we're about 6 weeks out from these leafing out, and that's when we collected these scions. The next thing I want to talk about is cambium. What is cambium? Cambium is the living tissue that is in the plant. The best way to show you what cambium looks like is to go to the computer, and we're going to look at a cross section of a log, and I'm going to show you what cambium is. Okay, so this is a cross section of a piece of wood. And if you just follow my cursor here, I'm going to point out what cambium is. So this outer layer is bark. This inner layer here is wood. This layer here in between the two, this is cambium. And this runs in a concentric ring all the way up and down the entire length of a trunk and the entire length of a limb. There's another example I want to show you real quick. I'm going to drag this in. Here's another example of cambium showing how it goes up and down the entire length of a plant. So here's our outer part here. This would be the bark, and then your inner part here would be wood, and then in between is the xylem and phloem. So xylem and phloem are the two components of cambium. And so the whole gist of grafting a tree is going to be to get the cambium of your scion lined up with the cambium of the rootstock. That's the entire goal of grafting a tree. But these are just some examples of what cambium is. So for this next part, what I wanted to do is get as close as I could, get the camera zoomed in as much as I could to give you an up-close view of how to graft a tree. I think this is what is missing on YouTube. I haven't found a video that gets in here really close and shows you what's going on. But the first thing we need to do, we're going to take our alcohol and we're just going to put a little bit on a paper towel. And where we're going to graft, I'm going to wipe it off. So we're grafting this Emperor 1. I'm going to graft it relatively low because you're going to be able to see where the rootstock and the scion wood fuse together on this. So, and that's just unattractive sometimes. If I were dissecting like a weeping Japanese maple, one that has, say like a dissectum, sometimes they'll do what's called a high graft. And we'll graft it way up here and let the limbs drip down on either side of it, and it's real pretty. But for these more upright Japanese maples, we typically do a low graft. So I'm going to go just above this node right here, if you can see that node. And we're just going to rub this down really good. We'll clean all this off. While I'm at it, we're going to go ahead, take our box blade. Clean this off really good. We're going to lay this off on the paper towel over here. We're going to go ahead and clean off our scion as well. We don't want any pathogens on this stuff. Okay, so now we're ready to kind of start working on some stuff. Now that everything's clean, I cleaned off these earlier, so I know they're good. These little suckers right here coming off the rootstock, we're just going to remove these. We don't need these. All right, so we're going to take those off. And I'm going to come in with my box blade. I'm going to come in with my box blade just above that node, and we're going to make an incision. I like to bend it a little bit. These little whippy rootstocks you can bend. And we're going to make a cut. You don't want to go too deep. You'll make one slow, steady motion. You don't want to be real herky-jerky with it. But you see there, I'll try to pull it back a little bit. There's where we're going to insert our scion. So here's our scion. And what we want to do is work this down to a point. I'm going to clean that off a little bit right there. See that little snag? I want to start with a nice clean edge on that scion. That looks a whole lot better. And we're going to make a cut on that side. We're going to turn it over. We're going to make a cut on that side. And that's what we end up with. Okay. I may want to get that a little bit skinnier on this side. You can see right there, it's a little fat. I didn't get it whittled all the way down to a point. That side looks pretty good. That side, I'm going to maybe go one more time, just like that. That looks a little better. Now, this is the important part. The scion has cambium exposed. Let's see if I can turn it around. And I'm going to point with the box blade so you can kind of see what's going on. Here on the outside edges, here and here. So this middle's wood. Wood's dead. Outside, that black or brown, reddish color, whatever you want to call it, that's bark. In between the two, there's just a sliver of green. It's going all the way around in this U shape right here. We want to line that up. That is cambium. Now remember, the cambium goes around just inside of the bark. So what I like to try to do is this. I like to put this in here. And you can't line it up on both sides, so you got to pick a side. And I'm going to line it up on the left-hand side here. And what I'm going to try to do is intentionally leave just a smidgen of that scion on the outside of that cut. And notice how I've got it pointed over towards our right. I know at some point in there, because that's in there just a little bit crooked. It's not straight up and down. I got the corner of my scion just barely sticking out here, and it's going back across. That ensures that I have cambium to cambium contact somewhere with this rootstock and the scion. I'm going to turn this so y'all can see. We don't want any air gaps right there. That looks really good. Okay, so if you see air in there, you may want to whittle down your scion a little bit more, but I really like how that scion looks. So the next thing we got to do is take some buddy tape, and this is made specifically for grafting. It's a little expensive in my opinion, but it works really well. So it stretches out, and it sticks to itself, but not the tree, and it's also breathable. So we can let air in, but it's also going to hold in some humidity. And we're going to go up in what I call half-row increments. So the bottom of the tape coming back around is going to go around 1/2 of the top of that, just like so. And here again, the bottom half here is going to wrap over the top half of that. And then from here, this is what I started doing a little bit different compared to some of the other videos I did on Japanese maple grafting. I learned this technique from somebody else and it works. So I do about 2 or 3 loops around the graft itself, and we got to keep the scion moist. You want high humidity levels in here, so you don't want this drying out. So what you can do with your buddy tape, hung up on that bud, there we go, is continue around with it on your scion, and these buds, they will actually break through the buddy tape. I've got a little crimp in it here. This takes a little bit longer to graft this way. The old way was to kind of get a little baggy. I'll show you a baggy here in a minute. And just like that, that scion's done, okay? We used to use these little baggies and spray some fungicide in here and put the baggie on there and tie it off airtight. But this works. This is a very good way to do it. Now, let's talk about what we need to do with it from here. So this is prepared. It's ready to go. So what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to keep it out of direct sunlight. I have a 50% shade cloth that I'm going to put it under. And I'm just going to leave it under there. I'm not going to give it anything special. I'm not going to put any fertilizer on it. We're not going to water it. We've got rain. It's February here where I'm at. We get a lot of rain in February. It's going to be fine. It's dormant. We're just going to leave it. Say you don't have a shade cloth. Well, where can I put it, Dr. Warren? You can put this on the north-facing wall of your house, a place that does not get direct sunlight. Just leave it. It's going to be just fine. If your scion takes, not everybody gets 100% take rate on a scion. Even people that have been doing it for dozens of years, occasionally, you know, the really, really, really good grafters get like 85 to 90% take rates on their grafts. Okay grafters get like 50%. If you're a newbie, you may want to do like 7, 8, 10 of them and hope that 2 or 3 of them make, and you'll be doing pretty good. Keep it on a north-facing wall of the house. and just leave it there for 6 to 8 weeks. And what you're going to see is the buds, if it took, the buds will continue to swell and they'll want to leaf out a little bit. Once you see that, you can slowly start to take some of this buddy tape off here. And that will be a new tree. Once that happens, let's pull this tree over to talk about it. This tree here was grafted last year, okay? I got to do a little bit of work on this one. So this was a Sangu Kaku graft. So here on the left-hand side, you see the pink bark here. This is Sangu Kaku. This over here on the right, my right-hand side, your left-hand side, is going to be vegetation that came off of the rootstock. The reason I know that this early, and this is just blooming out, is because of the pink bark here. Sangu Kaku is known for its pink bark. So what we're going to do, this stuff coming off the rootstock, I'm going to take this off. And you're going to see this with your graft as it takes. You're going to see that the vegetation of the rootstock kind of wants to shoot out and put on. And this one kind of got neglected last summer. So we're going to come in and now remove all the vegetation off of the plant that is not the scion we want to propagate. This is not going to hurt our graft at all. We'll cut that last little bit off right there. And that will die back to there, and it's going to be just fine. And so this is what 1 year's worth of growth looks like on a Sangu Kaku. I'm expecting the same out of that Emperor 1. Some of the mounding Japanese maples, they're not going to grow near this fast. So how did I get it to this point? Once it leafed out, and I knew that the graft had took, I waited till about June and I put a handful of slow release triple 10 fertilizer on this. You don't want to put a bunch of Miracle Grow and quick release fertilizers like urea on your Japanese maples. They're going to get leggy and the limbs are going to break. You want a slow release fertilizer. So find you like a Osmocote would be a great fertilizer that homeowners can get a hold of. Using Osmocote. So what am I going to do with this after I fertilize it? You got to keep it watered. And then when it goes dormant in October, November, somewhere in there, you're going to be left with something like this. Now that it's February, what I'm going to do, I've got several that I've got to do. And these are already starting to leaf out because I had them right up against a south-facing wall that gets sun all afternoon. I'm trying to push the growth on these. I'm going to take a bamboo stake. You see it's leaning a little bit. It's a 2 foot or 24-inch bamboo stake. Stick it right down the side here. And we are going to use horticulture tape and just tie that up tight so it stands straight up. And we're going to put more 90-day fertilizer in here once this completely leaves out. And probably I need to check the pipe. Oh yeah, it's rooted in. It's not root bound yet. That's a pretty good root structure. What we're going to do with these is bump it into a 3-gallon pot. Once it's in a 3-gallon pot, we can let it root out there and grow it for another year, or we can plant it. You could plant this as a 1-gallon. But that is how I go from a scion to a grafted rootstock through year 1 to get to something that looks like this. Guys, as always, thank you for watching The Plant Doctor. And until next time, happy gardening.